Hello, and welcome back to the Alchemist and The Oracle, a space where we engage in spiritualized conversations that deepen understanding, inspire transformation, and spark meaningful dialogue about life's most profound truths. You like that intro there? So I am joined. I'm joined with my co-host, Warrioress, Ardeshir RN, The Alchemist, and I am Nicole, Nick, Nuru, Love, The Oracle. So today's conversation is a discussion that The Alchemist is going to be leading. So I'm going to let her tap in and guide this conversation. So what are we talking about today?
Grand and glorious morning, afternoon, evening, and night, depending on what time you pick up and check out a video. We appreciate you joining us here today. Our subject, which is a deep subject, we're just gonna scour it a little bit, and that's the ego. We're gonna talk about the ego because it's an important part and a major part of who we are. Our biggest thing is about the key is a healthy ego. So most things are attributed to the negative parts of the ego. I love Major Ian Van Zant's definition is, in that part, this is a deceptive intelligence, which I'll get into later. We're going to talk about some of the positive attributes, but I'm going to go ahead and take what I have, and I'm going to identify what the ego is. The ego has a lot to do with, in spirituality, has a lot to do with, so I'll read the definition because it's really dynamic. In spirituality, ego refers, and it's a part of who we are, it defines our I, is a part of our consciousness that identifies with a separate self. So most people don't know what it is. It's often characterized by self-centeredness, desires, the perception of being distinct from everything else, including a higher power or the universal consciousness. Essentially, it is the I of us that believes it is isolated and needs protection from to protect his own interests, rather than recognizing the interconnectedness with all things. The id, I think Freud says it at the id. And this might end up becoming a two-part just because of how dynamic the ego role plays in our life. So, those are some of the negatives, the self-centeredness and things of that nature. But there's also some positive attributes of the ego, which is our sense of identity. It can provide motivation and ambition, self-confidence if you have a healthy ego. And helps with boundaries and protection. It helps with rationalizing decision making, adaptation and resilience, moral and ethical guidance, and social function and interpersonal skills. With some of us, there's a course for that. So with that being said, we'll get into the dynamics of introducing, which the definition and the role. And it is definitely an identity in a form of self-preservation. And there's several, like examples of that in protection or defense mechanisms. We talked about some of that in triggers, how, we defend ourselves. It can get easily offended. The ego can get easily offended. As she says, it's a deceptive intelligence. Sometimes it tells us a lot of lies. So kind of, if you're, just ideal is this whole thing of awareness, is the awareness of your ego. And once you, know what it is, and me defining that, and as we go through the sections of talking about it, hopefully give you a greater perspective of awareness, how it can serve you and how it's not serving you, and to create a healthy one. In most aspects, we know the ego is being self-centered, selfish. When people say egotistical, it's all about me, 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 me. It's all about it. It's all about it. And unfortunately, that can not bring us into a good position when we're walking through the world. It tells us a lot of things that are untrue. There's a reason why she used the term deceptive. And as I continue to do my work as a spiritual warrior, because the whole resiliency is, I don't have an ego. I don't have an ego. We all have one. So that greatest thing is, how do you personally identify, with your ego infused action, which I'll have that question for you as we go forward and understand that. And I guess I'll tie into an example of one of my deeper items is the ego. And I have a really good one for later in ego versus the higher self, which is the intuition that some of us don't know or have not defined the difference between the two, which I think is hugely important in how we walk this earth. So, the purpose is is for me to explain, which I did, and find out how we can use it for our personal growth and spiritual development, is to understand it and to recognize it when it comes through versus your inner knowingness. So you and my counterpart in the Oracle, I'm going to present this question to you. How do you personally identify with your ego influencing your thoughts and actions? So before you answer that, I'm going to give a kind of an example of what I've become aware of, but I think mine is so spiritual at all times because of the nature of how I walk the earth. Is the difference between that connection is this is the truth, or is it not the truth about how I need to move, which is the ego and the connected to the higher. So, and I'll have some examples after you go ahead and tell me what your connection is with that, because I always connect mine to driving and when I'm supposed to make a move. So for me, the ego might tell me to go, and then my other part of me tells me no. And then when you do it, then some chaos might happen, like an accident. That's one example of how I can determine the difference between normally the connection with yourself or the knowing will come first, and the ego will cut it. And then if you can get to know the difference between that and your knowingness, then you can really recognize when your ego is playing a part in your life when you're walking. So pose that to you.
The question was how the ego is present in my life, right?
Yeah, how do you personally identify with its influencing your thoughts and your actions compared upon what I've just shared?
So for me, the ego helps me navigate the human experience, the material world. And so I think once I've come to realize that and recognize that, I approach the ego as being serving for me understanding the human experience. And for me specifically, my ego allows me to have greater sense of understanding what other people are going through, how they perceive the world from that understanding. And so it's providing this awareness of the disconnection to our higher self that within my own self, I understand and I recognize how the ego shows up in my life. So I think I'm at a better place of understanding the purpose of the ego, and I'm also very good at being aware of who is in the driver's seat from time to time.
Indeed.
I think I'm able to also disconnect much more easily than most people from my ego, just because of the work that I do. I have to like detach from my ego because, you know, as someone that works with chakras and healing and energy, I have to disconnect from my ego because it's not about me. I'm being the conduit for God to come through me, the source to come through me. And so I spend a lot of time detached in that way. But I also have to say I'm still human, so my ego still shows up as well. I think for me, it shows up in my relationship with my boyfriend because I want what I want and he wants what he wants. And it's just like we're trying to navigate the material world together. And it's just like that is where I spend a lot of time in conversation with my ego. Like, look, girl, this ain't it, okay? So
Right.
that's how I see the ego and how I work with the ego. I think it provides an opportunity. It's important. I think like what you were saying, like it can be viewed very negatively, but it's serving because without the ego, we wouldn't. It provides us an opportunity to learn how to navigate the world that we live in, the human experience, for sure.
Well, yeah, it helps with a sense of identity. I mean, we all have some form of identity that also has been created from when we were younger.
Yeah.
And how that's developed into that and our, you know, how we grew up, parents, friends, how that determines on how that goes, whether that be, which we'll get into next, which will be the dual nature of the ego. And so for me, I looked at a lot of different things, and my mother used to say, be careful, be careful. And then, you know, being careful is fine, but it's kind of limiting. But I understand the aspects of the mother's thing, like driving, be careful. So I said, I'll watch out, I'll watch out. So driving is a perfect example. I watch out because I did a lot of it, 800 miles for umpteen years back and forth to my home city here in the land, Ohio. And if you don't know what the land is, I always give people to look it up. So the ego, I know, has played a huge part in identifying. I've had this battle, you know, throughout of being who I am and standing in my authenticity. And the ego has been a conduit of that. And sometime on the not so good part, which we'll talk about it, but the nature of knowing who I am, the nature of the aspects in which I stand, especially in my truth, which can't be unchanged. Try to, you know, it wants to conform with the world, and the identity of mine is been a right to conform because it has not felt good. And so when you look at that aspect of growth and understanding, and that development is to do the work. As you always say, do the work. And when you do the work, you can find out, you know, how to identify with your true self. And the ego can protect us in fight or flight situations as a protective mechanism, but you don't always want to walk in a protective mechanism because in that is holding you back, which would take me to the dual nature of our ego, which we are talking about the positive and the challenging aspects. So some of the positive aspects is how we utilize it to build goals for the future, you know, utilize it to build our confidence. And it actually helps us to be resilient if you choose to stay in it. And one of those resilience or tenacity is how I've had to roll and what I realize I've stood in to get me through some of the things I've gotten through in my walk in life, through leaving home and going to the military, which was very fearful. Because you didn't know some other people had relatives and family that gave them some insight on what that would be like. I had none, and I also don't like people hollering me in my face.
Trigger.
I found that out. Yep, it's connected.
Yeah,
it is definitely connected. More so. So definitely just a second. So throw that in there. So I love it. So we have to look at the positive aspects of it, and before doing the work and really diving into the spiritualness, which I'm so thankful for, because I am not the same. I'll never ever be the same. Becoming a spiritual warrior, having a rejection letter and an acceptance letter. Didn't know if I was accepted. So Lord, thank you. Thank you for the acceptance letter into the spiritual warrior program. So that was an ego thing. I was so fearful when I came. I was like, should I do it? Should I do it? Then the money thing. And this is an example of the ego telling you lie. You know you got it. So why are you tripping? That's a scarcity mindset of the ego, which is a lie. And so I had to look into that. And so the thing was to do it. And then I signed up before because I didn't know if it had went through because I was freaking out, which is another part of the ego, the fearfulness, which is the second aspect, is the challenging aspects. But it has this profoundness that until you recognize it, of how it keeps you safe in certain situations, then other things you need to step outside of that box. You need to step outside. And I know people use the word outside the box or outside the lines. I don't like the color outside the line. So if I'm in a coloring book, that's not happening. But in the other stuff, like being here, was outside the lines. And it's like, well, you can do this where the ego is sometimes like, oh no, you need to know more. You need to know more. You know, I know where to come from that, which is not true. I didn't get to this spot at this stage and age, I ain't telling today, in my life to not be an effective part. I had a career field, which I was doing that just naturally. So I like to have that conversation, that interaction in person. So when the ego said, oh, you can't do this, you know, but you're comfortable with this, sometimes we have to step outside of those norms. And so that's when you have to understand the difference of how it's supporting you and how it may not be supporting you at the same time. So you have that. So then you look at the challenging aspects. And so you, like I said, you have to know the difference. So it's ego driven, fear, it judges, and it has the illusion of separation.
Mm-hmm.
So when you happen to recognize, now, I was a very observant person, didn't have much to share, came up where, you know, there was an entity, and it depends on the family. Some people said they didn't have that, which was growing up in a area where it was to be seen and not heard. Well, in my aspect of what I know to be the truth and working with my godson is that all children need to be heard. Why are they here if they can't learn to navigate the world or have clarity? And so you end up utilizing what you have. And so my ego helped me become that's a positive, a very observant person. Very see things that most people don't see, recognize things that people don't see, whether it be intuitive or whether it be in the world, and catching things that most people don't catch. So that's some of the good. But when you look at the fear driven, and there's a woman who I helped back in my career, enforcement, who had this innate fear. She had got robbed, and she said that she got so fearful that she couldn't move. So when you cannot move, anything can be done to you. So, and this happened to her twice. So the second time, and because of a business that we were in, I was able to meet her. And I know that she did not want to possess that fear, that drivenness of when something happens. So she was open to a way, and I've got a hold of her a class where she could go and learn that she could still be the woman in the world. And even though that happened, that she didn't have to have that type of ego-driven fear if something went down, and was to be able to get her somewhere where she could defend herself, which is to have a confidence of being able to defend and self-preserve at the same time without, oh God, I forget the term, hey, when that happens, to freeze in the midst of a unfortunate situation. And so, and then realize, then there's the illusion of separation. When we are all one, we are more alike than we realize. And once you understand that, then you can be able to help to distinguish the difference for when the ego is serving you and for when it's not serving. And so I kind of understand that, and I use driving as a perfect example, and how, we utilize it in everyday life is the biggest thing, which is the next topic. So do you recognize those aspects of you, of the difference between your ego, the challenging part, and the positive part?
Yeah, I do. And I think one of my favorite books that talks about the ego is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And I like how he breaks it down, and he describes, kind of like what you were saying as the false self,
Yeah.
But so when I read that, and I've had that book for years, and every time I read it, it hits differently. What?
No, I said, yeah.
So I think because I've been reading that book off and on, I'm always very aware of how, like, the purpose of my ego and how it kind of shows up. And one of the things that I remember, kind of like my aha moment when it comes to the ego, is that the ego is always seeking external validation.
Yes.
And so it's through that seeking of that external validation, it's like you lean into like getting like possessions and like trying to reach a certain level of status and like achievements, and what I realize is that those are all okay to achieve, but you're also not just that. And so the ego is trying to like fight to maintain and take up all the space through this external validation, and it feeds into a lot of like my triggers and things like that, because the ego is trying to, like, through that external validation, through those external experiences that I can definitely like reflect upon and see like, oh, my ego was there. Like, I'll share an example of how I have to check my ego in my relationship.
I'm glad that you did that, because this is the section of ego in everyday life. So you just went right into it.
Want me to pause?
Validation. Yeah, go. And
so
how you react.
I recognize my ego shows up because of a trigger. And the trigger goes back to my father, the abandonment that I experienced from my dad. My dad would come. I remember my dad would like say he was going to come, and I would be sitting in looking out the window waiting for him to come, and he would never show up. And so what happens is I have this core memory attachment to that experience with my father, and how it shows up in my relationship with my partner. Like, early on, it was like heavy, like, because we've been together for like over 20 years at this point. It's kind of crazy to say. And so it showed up in a way of seeking that external validation of feeling secure in that relationship. And what happened is it triggered like, oh, well, he's going to disappoint you. Oh, he's not going to show up for you. Like, oh, who do you think you are to think that this guy's going to be different? Like, all men are just going to like abandon you, and like, you're not worthy. You're not attractive. Like, all the things that come up, it was triggering my ego to validate that external experience. And so it wasn't until I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is showing up and it's playing out in that way. And the ego it provided me an opportunity to see how I had this reaction and had this attachment to that story and that experience that was triggering. And I was seeking that external validation through my partner, but I realized it wasn't really my partner that I was seeking it from. It was from my dad, and my partner was just in the role of my father. So now I've gotten to the point where I've had that conversation with my partner, and I always compel people, have those conversations with the people you're in relationships with so they can at least understand your perspective. And so that has been the most shifting thing in my relationship with him, is that he kind of paused and he's like, sometimes he's had to remind me, like, I'm not your daddy. Like, I'm here for you. And that's why it's so important to have those conversations, to have that awareness of how the ego is showing up in your life and the attachment that you have to like a trauma or an experience that your ego is gonna like, okay, it's like trying to think of the word where what you focus on, your attention goes to. And so the ego's like, okay, let's do this. Like, we're in a relationship with the man. How can I provide you with that external experiences? Like the talk of like, well, he says he's going to show up, but girl, he's not really going to show up. And so I'm sitting there like not expecting him to show up. So it shifted my expectations within my relationship. And it was me self-sabotaging a healthy relationship dynamic. So I can recognize that within my relationship now because I've sat down and I have a level of self-awareness, but definitely can recognize how the ego showed up heavily at the start of the relationship, and now I'm able to really catch it, and he's able to like hold that space for me and be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, you all right?
And empathize, yes. Yeah. I can empathize with that. Without kind of going with the father thing, I remember something that happened. My father used to hang out in one of the spots here in town with his boys and stuff, and say he would be here, and I'd wait and didn't come. But I don't know what mine. I think it's a little different, but I get it. I never ever looked at it as abandonment. It just was a trust thing for me. I'm about trust, so. And the ego comes, but when I look at one of the huge everyday life stories, I think that's a great recognition that you had, and that's the thing of doing the work and knowing the difference between how it's serving you and how it's not serving you, right?
Yeah.
And to look at part when it's serving you, and just in the conversation. So that's a whole nother topic. But the ego plays that huge one, and validation, seeking validation. Oh my God, when you have someone who knows everything or portrays to know everything, that is where the ego shows up so much. And they're always the ones talking, this is right, and they're looking for that because there's something that has been missing or something that happened in a life cycle. So, always got to be right. Center of attention, all the time. Got to have it, got to be, no, life of the party is a whole different story, but to be the center of attention all the time. And when it's just like if we're talking here and feel, and then they just go in like I had happened, recently when I was playing cards. So, it was one of those things that you can validate. One of my biggest things that I look at how the ego reacts is when you're trying to accomplish something. So one of my biggest things is I realized that the ego held me back from, and when we talk about deceptive intelligence, it was very deceptive. So I'm young, I'm thinking I love sports. Played for a great while, and I think there was a part of me that wanted to go into sports medicine. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go to sports medicine. And then all of a sudden I have this shift that says, oh, 4 years is too long. That's just too long. I didn't do it.
Mm.
So it was like, and then I think I mentioned one of those examples because I think that hits me really good because I think I mentioned it in one of our other things about it is how it can deceive you in achieving the very desires of your needs while it's trying to protect you. And so, as I said, you don't know how many 4 years went away, or doing something of a significance. Some of the other stuff deals with the people pleasing, which is trying to show where you feel valued. So some in my life where I didn't feel valued or needed, and I know that I've kind of been a independent, and it's okay to do that. So, which leads into a real huge category for me is the ego versus the highest self, which I think will give a huge distinction because this is the nature that sometimes we dismiss. So the difference between the ego and the higher self is the decisions that inspire the difference between the ego and the intuition, because it's always trying to protect or tell you something. And so when your intuition is more of the knowing, it's a natural knowing of yourself. So of the higher consciousness and trying to align your ego with that for a more fulfilling and productive life. So one of my examples is driving. We'll go to driving again. So I ended up leaving a part of town. We had a snowstorm. So I'm leaving way one of the suburbs. And when you have this inkling, people might call it sixth sense. I call it, it's a millionth of a second that crosses your mind is your intuition versus your ego. So this is how my ego got in the way. Let's put it to you like this. So I'm driving down the interstate, and I normally don't need to get off at this exit, getting to where I need to go to get to where I was a place of residence. So I was told to get off at this exit. It was an inkling to get off. And then I was looking at the other path and I'm like, no, we good. We good. I'm going to just go on that way. But come to find out that my second guessing, my intuitiveness that said, hey, get off of here and go on that way, I ended up continuing on the interstate. Everything seemed fine until I got up and I see 55 million cars stopped on the right. I keep going, saw emergency vehicle cross over, didn't see nothing come up. And as I go up, yeah, be darned, my intuition knew something was happening. And see, I didn't need to know why it told me to get off on that exit. So I ended up running into an accident that delayed me for over an hour and ran into another certain situation that I will not speak about. My energy is clear with it. And ran into someone that it just wasn't a good experience. And so I realized at that time why it had to get off. Sometimes when something tell you to do something right then, you don't need to know why or question it. And then go do what the hell that you think you want to do, which is the eye view. Well, you go. Like I said, we love it, but it can be a deceptive intelligence most of the time because of how we've ingraded life and in the world. Your knowingness is not in the world. It knows what you don't know. So I understand, and sometimes I catch myself, but most of the time, especially with the deer situation, which was another situation, that I wanted to go down this other little way. They're trying to take the shortcut for me to get to either Home Depot or somewhere. And it wanted me to do something different. And after that happened, I was telling the Lord, and I have to try to keep working on it, that was because I did not listen.
Mm.
Okay? Those little things. And then it crosses out in front of me. This was the area where I knew where the post office. I hadn't driven down that street and I don't know when. And it didn't want me to do it that night because it already knew. And I was through. So that's the difference between the ego and to define the difference is that knowing, an inner knowing that says boom, and it comes across a millisecond. You talked about taking a left turn. If I'm going to take a left turn with a car, I'm either going to do it right then or I have to wait. Because if not, it will not be good. You take it at the time that you say that you're going to take it, or right, or go this direction that's telling you to go. Now you use it. Sometimes I listen to it, and then sometimes I go a different way. And you're right. Sometimes with the intelligence of GPS, it might know better. But when we know our city, we're like, I can go this way. I will be faster, you know. And I'm like, well, how come she ain't going that way? You know, because I know that's the way, that's the best way to go, you know. So I get it. So the ego is huge because I talk about it all the time and it's so cool, you know. And then every time when I think about, I'm talking about the ego because it's all attached. Everything is interconnected. And if we realize how interconnected things are, we can have a smoother, more productive life. It's not that nothing won't happen. You know, because I thought, you know, getting close relationship, God, this and that things were going to be hunky-dory. No, it's a growth process. It's a growth process. Knowing the difference between how your ego serves you and your intuition is a growth process. So you can have better travels. Whether you're walking, you're driving, you are in interaction with another individual. And see, that's where I have to catch where somebody's ego is prevalent when you're in a relationship. And I'm aware of somebody who has to talk all the time, has to be right. And it's not about that. It's like, yes, other people know stuff too. And we all see it from a different point of view. So I try to understand that point of view. I had something where my ego came up where I couldn't understand the difference between the car I had and the other car my husband ever had and the gas mileage thing. Well, I was spending more getting the same. They were spending less, but I still didn't understand it because I thought my car was better. So, and I had aha moment when I was driving one time and picked it up. I'm just saying. Well, it was.
Ooh, that was a prime example of the ego was in control. Ooh, external validation. Ooh, okay.
Keep it real with you. So, you know, so that's how you can tell the difference between the two and exactly what you were saying. So, sure, if you want to throw a little bit in on how you've seen the difference between the ego and your higher self, and then we'll go into transforming, how we can transform it.
I think the point I would make leads into the transformation. So I'll just pause on sharing, but I agree with you. I think, it comes with practice and just being aware of the purpose of the ego and understanding how it shows up for you. I think is definitely a practice. It's
That's
a practice, like everyday practice.
It is. It definitely is. I mean, it just is, and it is no getting. Excuse me. There's no getting around it.
I don't think we're meant to get around it.
Well, not in that aspect. I mean, okay, we can't get around being aware of it.
Yeah, it's like the acceptance, it's the understanding of the purpose and the acceptance of the purpose and being aware of when you have decided for whatever reason that the purpose is more than what it is.
Yeah.
Just catching yourself there.
Yes. Yes. Yes, for sure. I catch it all the time, and sometimes I have to say, God, the God, or whoever your understanding is, y'all. No matter what, it's all good. So the same one, the same higher power, and then sometimes I have to say, forgive me for not paying attention to my higher self. I swear.
It's interesting because
it's defy it so much, man.
It's because I go back to reminding myself, be in the world and not of the world.
Of the world. Yep, I say that a lot too.
Because it's like
glad you said
the ego is of the world.
The world.
When you are disconnected from your higher self, it's understanding the power and the purpose of the ego is the human experience. And it's gonna fight to maintain that, and you have to tell the ego, like, no. I see your purpose, that's your purpose, but also my higher self is here too, and that's the one that's in control.
Yes. I think knowing certain things at certain areas of town, certain things that's going on, certain signals, depending on what's happening in your community, is how the ego can keep you safe. Because if there's something that I truly need to know about a certain something, because of what my brother says about himself, I can go to him. And I can get...
Is that shady?
No, actually it wasn't. Okay. So silly. Everybody playing with you just now. I ain't playing with you.
My ego popped up. It's poking you right now. It's like, poke her. Sorry.
You ain't right. That's just what you know, but that's okay. No, I am serious, not a dig. Because I try to get him to understand, and he can listen to this, because this should make him feel freaking good, for that matter, is that you know some things. I know some things. And when it comes to certain things that you are in communication with on a certain level in community, I can find it out, but I like talking to people. And if I ask this, it ain't that I can't find it out. I just want to hear it from you, because you know something about the grind, a certain grind.
Yeah. And that's the gifting of the ego, is it allows you to connect to other people's lived human experiences.
Yes.
So that's the point of it, is to help you navigate the world.
So in that part of in the world and in protection, I can go there, and then the other stuff is just not so much. But that's how you can protect, knowing this in certain categories, or I'm trying not to use a certain word.
Just say it.
Gatherings, gang stuff. I mean, you just need to know certain stuff. And certain people know, and I don't mean that, no, that's not the word I wanted. Oh God, forget it.
I retract that statement.
Got me. I retract that statement. That's not it, but you got it. That what goes on in on the ground more so. And it's not that I'm unaware, but if it's something I want to know particularly, we have certain people we go to.
Right, period. The people that they're in the world and they know of the world.
Yeah,
those people. Yes, I get you.
And that's a good thing. I mean, it just is. You know, how he describes himself, I don't like it. And he's noted, and I've said it, it don't matter. But like I said, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. You know, I know. And then if I'm out of what I want to call out of communication with something that I wasn't before, because I'm not doing that like I was doing it before, then yes, there's people to go to. Or when I need to know something about in the news, if I didn't watch it, I just found out something I didn't know. Eventually, I'm going to find out. So I don't need to really integrate myself in something when the Spirit tells me not to do so. That's another difference. So when we talk about to move forward, the transforming it, which is what you're good as we talk about the awareness and practices to transcend and not let it be the controlling factor of our life, which I'll know that because you're really good at that. I am a person who is doing my best to try to sit still. I'm aware that I don't do that very well. I call myself well, one other bridge I know, back at a place that I was very well to attend in Omaha, said I was a walking prayer. So I just have to accept that. But I still need to sit still. At some point, sometime, with the book called, I just got this book. I ain't gonna go get it.
Please don't go get it. She still hasn't realized that we're recording. She can't walk away from the. Oh,
Oh Lord! But it's called Stillness Speaks. Stillness Speak. I think that's by Eckhart. That's by somebody. But and then another one. But let's get into how we're transforming our ego. As a part to mindful exercise and meditation to increase our awareness of its influence. And to talk about embracing the ego as part of oneself, acknowledging its presence without letting it dominate us. So that's what you wanted to tap into, and I've done that. I just like I said, I tell God, forgive me, but not listening. But to identify when it's working for me, and to embrace that and transforming it from being the dominant. And I think that's the part that works best for me, is making sure it does not dominate.
Yeah.
So you wanted to step into it. I'll let you go into it, and I'll give some examples, and then we'll kind of go into living beyond it, and then go ahead and wrap it up.
So,
and have anybody who pose any questions, go ahead and tap into your experiences, especially with what I said about your higher self versus the ego, and any experiences y'all might have you want to share in recognition as you're listening to this this here session that we're having. Yeah, that's.
Oh my goodness. So how I have really learned to ensure that I'm balancing like my ego and like my essence, my higher self,
I love that
is detaching from the outcome. And this is something that I've been in practice like for a long time. And I find that this is like the key. Like I have to detach from how things are going to play out, because innately when I detach from the outcome, I'm attached to my higher self, because that means I'm in that state of flow and the allowance of God to provide for me the outcome that, as in my human self, that sometimes we don't have the full capacity to see greater things that we can experience and that we have access to. I think, sometimes the ego can kind of limit our capacity to fully see things beyond the world, right?
Yes.
And so when in this practice of detaching from the outcome, and I think the work that I do really does require me to do that. I have to keep saying that. And so I'm in practice every day of that, and detaching from the outcome of like a goal or how I perceive it should play out. I innately, when I do attach to the outcome, I innately block myself. Because it's my ego. I'm giving my ego permission to come in, and I'm also blocking myself through seeing that I'm blocking myself. Like I'm aware of the judgment that I'm having of, oh, you're blocking yourself. So by detaching from outcomes, and it has helped me to really deepen my connection to my higher self, trusting myself, listening, and being able to discern the distinction between my intuition speaking to me versus my ego. And it's allowed me to be in a greater sense of balancing like my ego and my essence, as I was saying. Because it's me being in that middle and being neutrality. Because I'm trying to really, I've been actively, I'm not saying trying, but I'm actively being mindful of my energy and controlling my energy, because I can only choose how I respond to things, and I'm choosing to respond by detaching from the outcome, because I'm trusting, I'm knowing that, okay, even though I may be thinking it may be this, and it's just kind of like, that's really my lower self, my ego speaking to me. I know innately, because my higher self is the true expression of who I am, that I'm good. I don't need to attach. But I will say, having a spiritual practice and meditating is the key of maintaining that. I don't want to just be putting that out there like, oh, she's just out there detaching from the outcome so easily. You have to be in practice.
Glad you mentioned it.
You gotta be in practice. And for me specifically, silence is my sweet spot. And you were kind of talking about, like, for you, like, it's hard for you to get there. I think it's just a matter of finding what resonates for you specifically, that you can connect to yourself. Me, I hear so much, I get so much downloads that it can like blur my connection to the messages that are meant for me to hear, that keep me grounded in myself. So silence and being in nature is how I connect to my higher self, and I'm able to detach from the outcomes. I'm able to see how I'm making those attachments to outcomes, as well as through meditation and being in silence and really sitting with myself.
Yeah, so there's
that's
several
my practice right now.
Yeah, meditation is huge. Mindfulness practices. There are several apps, and as we'll throw some things in there for you to sit with. But I would use for most people whose mind goes all the time, like mine did last night. And coming up for this, it just wanted to soar. It didn't want me to sleep. And that was it, trying to dominate and try to say that when I was coming here, that I needed more than what I already knew to share. And of course that was untrue. And I did everything, and sometimes it's so freaking powerful for me, because it's been a real guide to get me through some awful crap. Okay, and so this is the thing of calming it down, to transform it so it doesn't be a dominant, so I can sleep when I need to sleep. But I'm also downloading as well. So it's just craziness. And so I got so much where I had to control it from the series This Is Us, and how to expand your awareness and openness. And when you do that, you are connecting to the truth of yourself. And when you talked about outcome, I'm glad you said that, because there's so much there involved in it, and not letting it dominate, and doing some of that work that we can give y'all some methods on doing that. I have the app Calm. I also have one that was given through a military background, because I'm sure I've mentioned that, and some other ways to do that, and a few other books, including, we can even recommend a really cool one from Yella that maybe some people may be unaware of, in meditation practices that we can
have
put
the name
down.
of the book? What's the name of it?
I don't want to leave the one of the books.
I'll let her walk away, and I'll share my.
Let her go. I'll be right back.
She likes to walk off set. I will say the book that I mentioned earlier, New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, is really, really good, because he breaks down the ego in such a way of the identification, that external validation. He really talks about the external validation, and brings it kind of back around in how to be aware of how your ego is showing up for you, and how to just be accepting of the purpose of your ego and allowing your ego to empower you as well. So that's one book that I would recommend because it really specifically speaks about the ego. In terms of like meditation and, you know, tools to create like a spiritual practice, I love Insight Timer. I think it's a great app where you don't have to, it has free access that is accessible. There's a premium account, but they actually have like quality content, like meditations and things of that nature. Meditation, they have like music on there. They even have like talks and things of that nature. So Insight Timer is something that I use all the time. I recommend it all the time because I like the fact that their free level is really provides valuable content, because some apps just you have to pay to play essentially. So those are my recommendations. I thought I saw her come back, but then she disappeared. I don't know that I can talk anymore. All right, I guess I have to continue on. I would also say, if one thing that I love to do is, okay, she's back. One thing I love to do is, I think just being aware of how you're feeling and holding yourself accountable for how you're feeling is really important. And if you're struggling, oh, she's back.
I am. There's something going on, unfortunately, down here that's going to interrupt. I'm going to see if they can come back. But one of the books that I like is not the True Meditation, but it's one that's about thought therapy and healing the hard stuff. It's her book called Get Over It. And we will put in the chapters the other one. I can find it, but Get Over It.
Get over
and that
it.
book, yeah.
All right, we'll put all the things. I will do my best to put all the things. Remember to put all the things down in the description box for people to access.
I'll be right back. I would like you to talk about how we're gonna be living beyond the ego and offering the daily practice of gratitude and community involvement to help transcend. And I'll be right back.
Wait, what am I doing? You want me to talk about? We're gonna pause and then we're
gonna pause. Yes, hold on, pause, and I'll be right back. Hi, y'all. Something about Y'all Advance the book Get Over It. I remember when the title was not cool with me. My cousin had went to see her when she was here in town. And that book, you want to talk about the ego? My ego, yeah. It took me a while to look at that book because of the title telling me to get over it. My mother had not long ago passed. And so I'm like, I don't need to get over nothing because I've been handed a lot of stuff. And so, yeah, that just tells you. And she talked about that the title was positive, but until you get into the book. So, and then we'll put in, that's just a good book to read. And then we'll throw in some other meditation projects like I think sometimes they give a trial on Calm, and there's some other meditative things we'll throw at the bottom. Also, we're talking about, living beyond the ego, which is, gratitude practices. Having a practice of gratitude and empathizing with yourself will pull you away from the me, or the I of that, or the id of the ego, and getting into the community involvement, help transcends that. And kind of being aware of it, the positive changes that come from it. And it's just about balancing. Once you become aware, you won't want, that control. You want an easy, more fulfilling, as less stressful life as you can possibly have. And it definitely begins with acknowledging the ego and beginning within. So we'll just go over some, things to recap. You have anything to say on that, Ms. Oracle?
Nope, I agree. Everything you
have so many things to do.
Yeah.
Just being aware of that. So when you're driving, if you drive a lot, that's a good way to find that. If you
oh my gosh. Oh my God. I will be fully transparent. When I'm in the car, my ego comes out, and I'm working on a way. I laugh at myself because I catch myself. I'm like, oh my God, girl, you're hilarious. I just like talk to myself in that way because it's just comical. How my ego shows up is comical. So if you can find the humor in your ego, I think that's a great way because it just kind of
Love that. I mean, you have to laugh at yourself. Oh my God. You definitely do. Sometimes I laugh at God too. I'll be like, are you funny?
I mean,
You
isn't
just brought
he?
us some
He's
situations.
hilarious. It's like,
Mother,
really?
Father, God is funny.
It's like, are we really doing this
Period.
right now?
I know, right?
Like,
It's just
okay.
crazy.
It's like, okay, I'll do my best to rock with it here.
Yeah, so, if y'all have any, invite you to reflect on any of your own experiences with the ego. Now we've had this discussion. Share any comments. If you have any questions, we'd be happy, to tap in and answer them for you as we can. And yeah, so, I didn't realize how much I thought the ego was not a topic that I would be doing, but I am really, really, really into the awareness of that versus my intuition, because we dismiss our knowingness, and it's the truth. It's the truth of who we are. So we have to figure out how to balance the deceptive intelligence, as Major Ea says. So
yes, yes.
So I just want to thank y'all. Allow me to lead this conversation with my girl, the Oracle, and just have a most wonderful and beautiful presence. And so when she talks about check out how is being in present is also, if we stay present in the moment, such good things happen in the present moment. We can plan for tomorrow, but we need to be present in the day. And it's something I continue to focus on each and every time. Our past gives us stories, but we do not need to live in it. It should not live on us.
So true. All right, so if you want to continue to be in conversation, be sure you subscribe to the channel, the Alchemist and The Oracle. I knew she probably forgot that part. It's fine. That's what I'm here for. And be sure to turn on the bell notification so you can receive notifications. And if you liked this episode, you found it helpful, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. React, respond, engage with us. Please, 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 please. And also too, if you know someone that needs to get their ego in check, which is probably every single human being that you know, be sure to share the video. No shade. Or maybe it's your ego being petty, and hey, who am I to judge?
Word. Much love, y'all.
Bye.
Peace.